And so they have to be in tune of where those opportunities exist to even be able to go do that, because the plant's not just going to do it because they want them to do it. It's like, hey, you need to stop production so we can do this. Back to your priorities, that's not going to be a priority.
Yeah, you've already lost that conversation.
That's right. You're going to have to wait till we have a window that we're going to be cleaning stuff and fixing things and replacing things, Then you can come in and be a part of that chaos, when that's going on.
Well, welcome back to Season 3 of OT After Hours, a podcast about industrial cybersecurity, why it matters, and all of the challenges that it presents. Before we dive into the topic, we should probably go around and introduce ourselves. But before we do that, if you're looking at the title of this episode and you're saying Part 2, where's Part 1? What you need to do is you need to pause right now and go into the show notes and look for a link to the Industrial Cybersecurity Podcast. Because last week, I did a guest appearance on that podcast, and that is part 1 of this discussion. And we're going to be continuing that discussion today, but it really is in your best interest to, well, A, follow the Industrial Cybersecurity Podcast because, hey, it's another podcast about industrial cybersecurity, and B, get the context for the discussion that we're going to be having today. And with that in mind, for those of you who are now still listening, let's go around and introduce ourselves. And I'm going to give the first introduction over to Dino Busalachi, who is joining us from the Industrial Cybersecurity Podcast. Hey, Dino.
Hi. Yes, Dino Busalachi with the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider podcast, and I also work for the design group.
Yes, and
big Rockwell partner.
Yes, and as we explained in episode 1, because this is a two-parter, Dino and I met when he was at Rockwell HQ a few weeks ago doing training for the SecureOT platform. And, of course, we're also happy to welcome back Lance Lamont.
Hi. I lead the research team here for SecureOT device support.
And also joining us again, been a hot minute, Mr. Tyler Bergman.
Hey, guys. Yeah, it's been a hot minute. I've been out traveling the countryside. So team lead over here at Rockwell Automation for the SecureOT platform.
Dino was one of the people attending training a few weeks ago in Milwaukee and kind of just emerged that, hey, he also has a industrial cybersecurity podcast. So,
yeah, I took the liberty of watching your April 6th episode where you're talking about, I've closed it out, but you were talking about like some of the other environments and who has ownership of OT cyber. I think I had Craig in there too, if I remember right. Yeah, he's another cohort of yours.
Give you a little bit broader background. So we became part of the design group in July of 2024. The design group is a Rockwell Platinum partner. So we've been, and so prior to that, I actually started my own company back in 2018, focused purely on OT cybersecurity. Before that, I was working for Rockwell, where Ken's at. I was in the Network Security Services group for several years. And before that, I used to be in the beer business. I worked 20 years in engineering.
Ah, nice.
Been in and around the manufacturing environment for close to 4 decades. So,
anyway. Nice.
So when these cybersecurity technologies started coming out a dozen plus years ago, I really changed my focus into. I knew there was a gap, a niche in this particular space, only because I've been working on the plant floor for decades, and realized that this would be a good fit to pursue as I round out my career of dealing with cybersecurity on the industrial side of the house. So
it's a fun one.
I met Ken, a few weeks ago up in Milwaukee, so going through their technical training with SecureOT.
What do you think about the platform so far?
Well, I'd like to get the tool in-house in our lab. We have our own lab. There's a couple of things that really are appealing. One is the patching capability, something that's really needed in this environment because, as manufacturers, they don't patch on a regular, consistent basis, if at all, in many cases. Yeah. So, being able to provide something, getting back to that asset ownership, who would actually manage, administer, and maintain that. I don't see IT ever doing that, as far as upgrading control systems. And so how do you get the OT environment really to start developing a mature practice, if you will, in dealing with, improving their cybersecurity posture within their industrial environments. Because for IT, it's difficult for them. It's just not where they live day in and day out. So
yeah, and it introduces a lot of operational risk out there too, because they just don't know the systems and the consequences behind it. If you go out there and just willy-nilly just start rebooting like servers within the system that are like in a operational business, I mean, you just either run a batch or you like grenaded a turbine out there or something like that.
Right. Yeah, and I think IT, anybody who's from an IT perspective who's been working in the manufacturing space long enough, I think they've learned that, know that, because they've inadvertently pushed patches out and caused grief. And so certain organizations, they understand that. And so their position is just leave it alone and let's let the OT guys deal with it, and at the same time, they've got this, whether you want to use AI is going to be a rocket engine that's going to really drive them to have to do a better job. And I'm just talking about the organization as a whole, and improving their security around their control system environments. IT has to somehow be intimately engaged, right? They have to be aligned, they have to be transparent, they have to be very collaborative, and they have to understand how that place works. And you can't do that sitting in your corporate office, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to go out there and feel the pain, and crawl around that dirty, dusty, dangerous environment, whatever that place may be, and see how it operates, and look to, just see what their production schedules look like, and what their maintenance schedules look like, and what line changeovers look like, and all the things that are involved in day-to-day activity in those plants. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're going to have a very hard time trying to secure and protect that stuff. So,
yeah, getting to know the impact of it. Well, and I think I remember listening to your podcast on the April 6th episode, and you were talking about, and you just mentioned it, where the IT folks just, they're just quarantining that off. And that's a lot of the times where we'll see in a lot of the organizations is that's kind of like their default response. It's like, we know everything back there has impact and we don't want to have any type of responsibility for it. So we're just going to put up a nice, like, candy shell around all of that to make sure that it's, not being impacted in an adverse way, which is good. At least they're mindful of that and something that's happening out there within those ecosystems. But, it's trying to build those partitioning schemes off of. And then you start building up on there. It's like, well, then the old adage is you don't know what to protect if you don't know what's out there, right? So that's where our platform comes in. We try to get you all the way down to not even the HMIs, the OS level units, but also telling you all the discrete firmware, all the embedded devices that are out there that are network capable, right? So that's kind of the big dynamic of our product. And then, once you start showing the folks of all the things that their environment, it's like all kinds of red flags all over the place. Like, well, I'm running like firmware back from like 2005 on these controllers out there, yet it's still running the plant, right? So it's trying to get over the obvious things, right, with your folks too. So it's like we get the painfully obvious stuff out there, and then we start trying to broadcast out there. It's like, okay, well, here's your very delicate components that you don't want to jam up here. Like it might be like a Bentley or Woodworth or something that's like directly connected to the turbine to turn things off. Or something that could run a batch for you and processing and things of that nature. So it's interesting, right? And then trying to really derive that back out for operational risk back into the organization. And then they start talking about, well, what can we do about these? Patching is one, right? But that also has big consequences to it as well, because the underlying application could be very sensitive for patching in itself too. So you got to get vendor approved patches, and that's a whole another dynamic too. Yeah.
Well, then there's the network, the way that it's set up, and the fact that the cats and the dogs are living together on the same, network. Nobody's really aware of what's going on, and because we spend a lot of time just demonstrating to them just how convoluted that is. It's like you got your filler over here, talking to the mixing and blending systems, there's no reason for that. It needs to go to the releasing grid to pull product. If you want to start filling bottles or cans, why is it communicating with, the mixing and blending systems, or to IT or to the internet, or even got PLCs that are trying to get to the internet. They're being blocked, but they're still trying to get out, and they don't even see any of that stuff. And then don't, get started on the support aspect of it, the varying remote access technologies that are buried in those plants that have been put in by the OEMs and the system integrators and plants themselves. And, IT doesn't have any visibility into any of that stuff. If I walk into 10 plants, 8 of them are going to let me hook my laptop that I brought with me into their environment. And they've done no scans on it. They don't know what's on my machine. I have to use my machine or a machine that's running, Studio 5000 on it because I need that to be able to work with the PLCs. And, it's not like they just have that stuff laying around. IT doesn't have it in their inventory of laptops to give me to go do that. I got all the project files on my machine, and again, it's that dynamic that IT is, they're just not going to solve it. And for those folks that keep telling me that there's convergence and IT is going to own it and run it, that's the day I see the CIO becoming the new plant manager. When the CIO is that plant manager, then I'm with you. But until that day happens, you're just, you're pissing in the wind. Because we work in the plants all day, every day. I mean, that's where we live and breathe as a controls integrations group,
Mm-hmm. I love it. Go walking around, you pick up this puck that's got an Ethernet cord in it. So, hey guys, what's this?
Yeah, you find flaps.
Verizon hotspot.
Well, and they'll tell you the machine's isolated. It's not connected to anything, right? Well, it's like, well, how do you do support? And it's like, well, we got this jump box, or, well, when you open up the panel, there's a Cradle Point cellular modem sitting in there, And,
Yeah.
And the OT guys would just, keep that on the down low, right? They don't want to, espouse the fact that their ass is hanging in the wind. They don't want to say that. So I don't want to say they're lying to you, but they're lying to you. I mean, they just
sometimes they genuinely don't know. Sometimes they're deliberately omitting an important detail.
Because they know it's against policy. They know that. Yeah. Right. But they're willing to assume the risk. I had a plant manager up in Omaha that had his own ISP link in, because he got tired of waiting on IT to get remote access set up when he needed help. So, the IT guys are like, well, they're going to fire him. They're not going to let him do that. I come back. I was working for Rockwell at the time. Come back 6 months later on a tour of the plant, for another project. That internet connection was still there. Plant manager was still there.
Wow.
I mean, I think I've mentioned before on one episode or another, and this is way back before I was at Rockwell, but I was doing an assessment at one plant, and the lead tech there was constantly complaining about the fact that a certain printer was dropping off the network every single night. And I think I may have erroneously referred to this as a switch. It was, in fact, a printer in a previous episode. But he was complaining that it was dropping off every single night. And I had actually just come off of a pen test engagement, so I still had Wireshark and a bunch of other stuff sitting on hand. So we set up Wireshark and just kind of tapped off of one of his network switches to just listen overnight. We just left it running. And overnight it was hilarious because the traffic coming off of the IP address for this box, print traffic, print traffic, print traffic, print traffic. And then 5 minutes after the night shift change, after shift change for the night shift, it was a 24/7 facility, stopped being a printer, stopped seeing HP, started seeing Belkin. Belkin? The heck is at the same IP address? And started seeing different packets, a lot more HTTPS traffic. And then just a few minutes before shift change at the end of the shift, Belkin went away, HP came back. And there was a flurry of, delayed print jobs that were coming in. So that morning, we're going through this stuff and we're like, what is all this? HP, Belkin, what's going on? Well, let's go to the shift, let's go to the office, right? Because it was the printer in the shift manager's office. So let's go to the office. And we start looking around, and then pull open this one drawer. And there's a little wireless router sitting there. And it says Belkin right on top. So we're just like, could this be? Walk over. Sure enough, behind the printer, the power brick is there. That little barrel connector, right, for the power. It's like, there's an extra power adapter here. Oh, it connects to this thing right perfectly. Pop out the cable from the printer, plug it into the router, go back to Wireshark. Yeah, this is our device. This one right here. Turns out the night shift manager would just
Streaming.
I mean, flat network. Now, this is back in 2012, so streaming was like in its infancy still, really. But he was basically just, he just wanted somewhere to throw wireless signal out onto the plant floor so he could like play whatever he was doing on his iPad.
Right.
You know?
Colo machines that have been sent out for repair, and the IT guys' way of assigning IP addresses, he would do ping sweeps. He'd ping the network to see what did not respond and assume that IP address was available, and he would assign that. Assigned it to a control system that was running a wheel press for an automotive tire manufacturer. And then the Coca-Cola machine that had been out for repair was brought back, connected to the network, and lo and behold, the PLC running the tire press or wheel press was the same one that the Coca-Cola had. So there was their conflict, right? I saw a furnace go down at a bottle plant because of exactly what you just described, because the operator would come in and he wanted to stream at night, with YouTube and Netflix sitting in the control room, and brought his own Wi-Fi device router in and would plug it in. And that control system couldn't handle the traffic overload. And once those furnace control systems start faulting, they only go one direction, and it's down.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, Mr. Fireball gets out the boiler, and that's bad for everybody's. Yeah. So,
the stories like I said, are just rampant in that particular space. As many years as we have, this group that's on it, we have.
Well, I mean, Lance can tell you all manner of stories about and not even. Lance's best stories are like the ones that are like more inadvertent, right? Like, I mean, okay, sure. If you're like disconnecting something, like that's deliberate action, right? If you're like picking an IP address and plugging something in without verifying against like some master list, hey, is this address allocated to anything? That's a deliberate choice. It's a little more accidental, but still, like you're making choices there. But, Lance's team, and again, there are device wranglers. They're the ones who like break apart the devices, figure out how to talk to them, figure out how to not brick them. And just the number of times that you've discovered inadvertent ways to completely upend a device that sometimes even the vendor didn't necessarily know about.
The number of devices that I can't say by name while I'm talking about how you talk with them is non-zero. Hey, if you accidentally send a 3 instead of 2 in this packet that doesn't require anything else, you can punch this thing off a network until it is rebooted. That's a non-zero number of devices. It's really pretty concerning when you get down to it.
Yeah.
And if that's your boiler controller, well.
Well, and I would say over 2/3, if not 80% of most unplanned, unscheduled downtime are just the human error. Not somebody trying to be malicious as much as it is just human screw ups. In a lot of cases.
Yep.
All the things we're talking about.
As Ken mentioned, my team is the team that tries to figure out how to safely communicate with these devices, and we have come back to the organization and said, you don't. There is no safe way to talk to this device. We will talk to the management software running on this engineering PC, and we'll let them deal with talking with this device because, oh my goodness, one wrong byte, one wrong timing, and it's a finicky little thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and everyththing we're describing is really why this is so difficult for IT to really take ownership of this space.
It is.
It's not that I don't want them on the field. I want them in the huddle. They just can't be the quarterback.
Well, I think at some level there's really core different priorities, right? The IT, when you're looking at, if I'm looking at my laptop here on my desk, hey, if we reboot it tonight, that's not a problem.
Right.
And so your mindset when you're looking at IT assets, it's okay. We want them fully patched. We want to make sure that we're running the latest and greatest and all that sort of things. The risk acceptance is higher as well. I mean, if we accidentally install a new version of Word that has a problem with compatibility with one of the documents that one of our team members uses, we can resolve that the next day and not have a problem. But there's so much more risk if we have a issue there. Ken, you're making faces right now that make me wonder what's going on. So I'm going to stop talking and just let you talk.
No, I just had a very, very quasi-PTSD type flashback. Finish your point and maybe I'll fill in the story.
No, I'm just basically that when we look at IT, there's really, really different priorities than when we look at OT, right? Yep. The OT priority is we need that uptime. We can't have that system come down for any reason. It's risky to install a safe patch just because we don't know of the consequences. And discovering the consequence after you bring the factory back up from a patch is potentially huge, whereas having Lance over in the software team say, hey, that new version of Word broke my document, that's not a big deal. Hey, that new patch you put on this PLC just broke the production line, that's a big deal.
Yeah, if we had one packaging line in a brewery, not putting beer in a can or a bottle, that was $80,000 an hour loss. One line. And there's 6, 7, 8 lines in a plant. You lose all of packaging. That's a big damn day. You know, I mean, it's painful. And like I said, I just don't think IT wants to get that close to the sun. I just don't believe they do.
Because nobody in IT makes enough. Like, their job is not worth as much as 7 lines down in a beer production factory.
Actually, I think that's a simple test we could have here, right? The IT, the head of IT, if they can answer the what does a minute of downtime cost on your systems? If they can answer that question, they can potentially understand the OT mindset, right? Because in OT, we talk in that language. We talk in the language of expense. We talk in minutes of downtime or hours of downtime and millions of dollars. If when we talk to our IT manager, if our IT manager can say, okay, we're going to install this new patch on every one of our systems, it's going to be down for 30 minutes to install this patch, and it's going to cost us X million dollars of productivity, then maybe they're prepared to start looking at the OT space. But until they think in that sort of mindset for everything they do, I'm not sure they want to be in the OT space.
Well, and even to rewind that just a little bit, to even put that plan together, they're going to get shoved into a maintenance window that's got a whole bunch of other shit going on in that plant, telling them you've got your 30-minute to an hour-long window because we're starting up at 12 o'clock and we're going to start running, so you better be gone and out of the way. And so they have to be in tune of where those opportunities exist to even be able to go do that. You know, because the plant's not just going to do it because they want them to do it. It's like, hey, you need to stop production so we can do this. Back to your priorities, that's not going to be a priority.
Yeah, you've already lost that conversation.
That's right. You're going to have to wait till we have a window that we're going to be cleaning stuff and fixing things and replacing things, you know. Then you can come in and be a part of that chaos, you know, when that's going on.
Yeah.
I had a recent conversation about network gear isolation. So there is a couple of different train of thoughts, and I get the philosophy out there. So there's like what I call and across the industry standard, it's like hyper-converged network infrastructure out there, where you're doing OT and IT on the same logical networking segments and things of that nature. I get the concept. There's a little bit of it that makes me cringe a little bit, but there are some of the manufacturing sides and some of the other verticals out there that can have some survivability on that. If like you're doing like patching of like network gear during the middle of the day or something like that, and redundancy and all this other crazy stuff, multiple connections and whatnot. But if I'm like updating firmware on a stacked pair of network switches, like your redundancy goes out the window, and you're going to have an intermittent connectivity when that switch needs a reboot from, that firmware upgrade. So hopefully, like your skid over here that's operating can work with an intermittent network connectivity out there, and it's not connected to a bunch of other systems that are interdependent to each other for that network connectivity that's on there. Mm-hmm. So the conversation led is like, well, you can run OT and IT converged and have it being operational. It's like, well, you're building a layer out there that you're having your boundary not as many layers removed from a cybersecurity standpoint that could have impact out there, and then that gets you to a point of where now I can't update my switches to maybe a more secure firmware because I've got too much operational constraints going on to where I got to wait for like a full like black plant outage before I can even update that network switch, right?
That's very true. You're right. And not understanding those interdependencies that you're describing, which a lot of organizations don't, that if you have that intermittent activity because they don't understand that I need to call for steam for utilities because I'm going from gravy to mashed potatoes and I'm using the same assets to do it, but I got to clean the vessels to be able to switch my product. And IT put a firewall in the middle of the mix and it doesn't know what the SIP protocol is, so it's blocking me from getting utilities to get hot water and steam to clean my stuff. Not knowing that, right? I mean, it's amazing how many people just don't understand those interdependencies amongst the cell, the zone, the line, the process area, and have it mapped out to be able to do the things that you're talking about to put together some type of strategy on how you would go about upgrading certain pieces of equipment within the plant, right? It's very hard. Again, it gets back to you have to be really in tune to that plant, and even if you got 20 or 30 plants in your fleet, no two are the same. And they operate very differently, especially if you're in different countries. Just the culture is different, the behavior is different. Maybe the control systems they're using are different, even though they're making the same damn product. But
the attitudes are different altogether too.
Yeah, right.
How often, when you're evaluating a facility, do you see a network diagram that has documentation on acceptable downtime within each subnet of the network or each section? Like this one can accept 10 milliseconds. This one can accept 2 minutes.
No.
Right? We don't know. And that's where it all comes back to the millions of dollars of minutes, right?
Yeah.
Some of them can't.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, even if you went through the PLC, code to find out what those were, right?
Yep.
There's so many different hands that have touched that stuff. Whether it's OEMs and system integrators, a lot of our clients don't even have controls engineers. We're their controls engineers, and they want life cycle replacement, some type of maybe a new product that they're bringing in. They want to go from 12-ounce cans to 24-ounce cans, and so we're going in there to help them with the programming. Even though they're using the same asset, we're helping them make that happen. And the mergers and acquisitions of these plants have been going on for decades. You might have a plant that's, turned over 4 or 5 times in the last 20 years, 5 years. And, the tribal knowledge is gone, documentation's gone, and it's just, sometimes you really feel like you're starting from scratch when you're walking.
A lot of the times you are, coming in blind.
Well, yeah, you're going in blind a lot of times and you don't know who was there before. So you're very cautious as far as any changes and all that. So one of the most recent things that just blew my mind, and this was one of those earth-shattering moments. I just thought, that was a resume-generating event there. The security group came in and said, absolutely, we're going to change your domain admin on your DCS Active Directory structure.
No.
They went in and they did it. Luckily, they had a vendor person there, and he spent the next 30 hours unraveling all the chaos that happened just from that one small change. And I was just like,
yeah,
I wouldn't even do that on my IT domain because I know the impacts of it, right?
And I mean, on the one hand, this is, where the former coworker of mine, again, pre-Rockwell, had multiple T-shirts, probably still does. Compliance is not security. Security is not compliance. It was like front and back, right? Because, from a from a standards standpoint, regulatory compliance, all that goodness, sure, your domain admin password should, in theory, be changeable because your domain admin account should, in theory, only be used for administering the domain and not be used to connect anything to anything else. And in practice, that never happens, and especially in OT environments, right? Because at the end of the day, you just, I need a login. Get me a login, right? It's like, well, I don't have another login, and, Todd's away. He can't put a new one into the domain for us. I don't know how to do Active Directory. Here, just use this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we shift changed the operators that came into their stations. it was the same account. It was a guest account for them because they didn't want them trying to remember the passwords and use an excuse for 20, 30 minutes of downtime. They can't start the lineup, to do their job because they can't remember the password. So it's like, well, you got to remove that headache,
It's even scarier than that, Dino. It's even scarier than that. They don't necessarily distinguish between a username and a password. This was like in one of my first IT gigs. So this wasn't in a plant environment. This is actually just one of the sales guys who's about 4 cubicles down from where I was. But we had to do a round of Windows updates. So my manager and I stayed late on a Thursday evening to just, go around. We'll just log in as, like the domain admin. We'll do the patching and updating on all of the front-facing workstations, not affecting production. This is all just like salespeople stuff, except for the one VP who insisted on staying on Windows 2000 because his mouse scroll wheel didn't work in his favorite software if we upgraded him. But anyways, but everybody else we just updated. But this one sales guy in the morning, comes rushing over to my desk. He's like, "What did you do to my computer? You've broken it." I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Well, I can't log in." "What do you mean?" So he walks me back and he brings up the login screen. And of course, it's my IT account, right? That's the one that's there waiting for a password. And he just starts typing in his password. And he's just like, "See, I can't log in." Types in his password again. "See, I can't log in." I'm just like, "Whoa, dude. Okay, 2 things. First, stop, because you're going to lock me out." I don't know how many times you tried this already, but it's still letting you try. So let's not break anything else. But then also, that's my account. You just need to, over down there in the lower corner, you just need to click on you and log in. He's like, "Well, what do you mean? I only I'm like, "Well, you just select your user account." He's like, "I don't have a user account. I just have a password." Okay. Okay. That's where we're at today.
Let's catch you up to the rest of this entry here.
Yeah. Just so yeah, you're right. It's shared accounts because they don't want to ever have a potential loss of view situation. They don't ever have a potential lockout situation, like you say. Sometimes they just don't even realize that that's even a thing, right? If they see that password field, they just punch in the password. It's usually on the underside of the keyboard or taped to the monitor, and away they go. There's not really that sense of would I log in as me? I don't even know what that means necessarily half the time.
Yeah. And we're exercising the best IT practices for the last 15 years in OT environments as well. It's right.
Creatures of habit, and what I always say is hope is not a strategy.
No.
So Ken's example actually brings a good point, though. That person was hopefully a reasonably successful salesperson.
Yeah, very.
So they were a very successful salesperson. They didn't need the out-of-domain knowledge of username and password. They were able to be a successful person without that knowledge.
Yes.
He didn't even realize he needed that domain knowledge until he ran into a problem, which was, hey, I didn't realize I had a username and a password. And when we talk about IT coming into OT, and all this convergence, we're going to run into the same problem. There is definitely OT domain knowledge that's so obvious to us. We're like, yeah, it's just a username there. Why wouldn't you fill in a username? But it's not IT domain knowledge whatsoever. And the scary part is trying to build that knowledge base. If we're trying to unify this, how do we know where that's missing? Because we're crossing domains. We're crossing knowledge bases.
Well, sometimes you can't, right? You're just
domains.
interpreting.
Yep, exactly.
If they could use the same safety, protocols, safety is always job one on the plant. We call it digital safety when we're talking about cybersecurity. And so the question is, you can't show up at the plant unless you've been trained, gone through safety training, whatever other requirements they have. Make sure you have proper PPE to even be in here, and what areas can you go into or areas you can't go into, and the different sounds based on alarms and whether it's an ammonia leak or a tornado or fire or, some other crazy activity going on in that plant. Cybersecurity at some point is going to have to get in line with that type of practice and policy and governance, in my view.
Go ahead.
I remember cleaning up a conficker infection at a pulp mill in about 2012, and the two cyber forensic investigators from the company were out there, and they were working alongside me. And I mean, it was slow going because config was kind of a pain in the butt to deal with, or it was at the time. And there's a whole story there. But one night, about halfway through the cleanup op, and we're sitting down at this like little Italian restaurant, and probably a couple of bottles of wine too many already for the evening. But we just start, one of them, like, she starts as like, how do I even, she's like, we don't have training for this. Like, how do I even begin to train them? And just like you said, Dino, and I mean, again, like I was completely thinking off the cuff at the time, but that was the first place my mind went to. It's just like, you already have a safety program. I know because I took the training before I walked on the plant site. This is that, right? I mean, in this case, all it was doing was flooding your network traffic, right? Like that's the main symptom of configures. Your network gets completely pinned. And of course, that eventually started to affect their control communications. But, you know, if it had affected a more critical system, right? And now all of a sudden we're dealing with like safety issues, chemical releases, things like that, or inhibited the preventative systems that would stop same, right? Well, then it becomes a much bigger deal. But at the end of the day, I mean, and I think they actually did wind up, at least for the start of it, folding basic cyber hygiene, basic cybersecurity practice into their operational safety training because, I mean, they already had a framework for it.
Right.
And
they all do.
Yeah. It was easy enough to conceptualize, you know, okay, well, yeah, this could potentially be an operational type risk if these things happen. So yeah, let's just build onto the training program that way. That's not to say it's necessarily the absolute best way to do it. Maybe it's better to just grow out a program that derives from the safety training, but is much more specific, as opposed to, you know, flipping from here's, you know, your arc flash protection module, here's you don't use USB sticks module. These things don't necessarily like, it's a bit of a whiplash there to go from one to the other, but
well, I don't know if this is the right analogy, but it's like, you know, either you bring the mountain to Muhammad or Muhammad goes to the mountain, right? When it comes to this OT world. And, you know, the OT guys are not going to make their way towards the mountain, right? You're going to have to come to them. And you will. Because the world is so decentralized. You know, IT's world is very centralized, right? They standardize on networking technology and compute and database and operating systems, and they have their, you know, their strategies for governance and policy, you know, to stay as current as they can, you know, for like a patching strategy. And so it's easier for them to manage, and or the third parties that they hire, right? A lot of managed services, some of these IT organizations, you know, leverage to help support their infrastructure, for example. But you get on that plant, you guys know this, there's tons of different stuff that's out there. You got Rockwell running packaging, you got Siemens over mixing and blending, you got Schneider Electric on the HVAC system. This equipment came from Germany, that stuff came from Italy. They're using, you know, Mitsubishi in there, or, you know, Yokogawa over there. And, you know, I got 8 different types of switches in here. I got Cisco, I got Stratix, I got Intron, I got Phoenix Contacts, you know, I can go down the list. The same thing. I got VMs, I've got standalone bare metal machines, you know, I mean, it's just a hodgepodge of stuff, you know, and, you know, IT, they solved that problem, you know, decades ago, fixing that, right? But in our world, it's not that, you know, and so how do you want to come in and try to unravel, to set a solution forward that's going to improve your cybersecurity posture isn't for the faint of heart. You don't have the resources you need to do this. If you got 30 plants, you're going to need dozens of people to solve this. If you're going to try to do it all at once, you know, if you're just going to put a small group together, it could take you several years to get through these plants and forget the capital plan that you have to spend, you know, because, you know, a third of your assets, your control systems that are running your packaging line are still on Windows 7. You know, one of the largest breweries in the world still runs on Windows 7. They've got thousands of PLC 5s, thousands of them.
You got to have a Windows XP box in there somewhere. Well, it's always on the bingo card.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a single plant that we don't go into that doesn't have it in the life, in the support operating system, and they're running some critical process in the plant. Not a single.
Oh, yeah.
And no way to get them off that because, you know, it's literally you got to rip and replace the whole darn thing. You know, I even saw in one case, I remember doing one assessment and looking afterwards at like the software list. Like, why do you have DOSBox on here? Like, why is DOSBox installed on this computer in the middle of your plant? Like, is there like some plant operator on the night shift who's a big fan of the old Sierra games?
XCOM?
Well, funnily enough, the guy actually was a big fan of the old Sierra games, which is how he knew to suggest DOSBox, because their IT group was really putting pressure on them to get this old, I think it was a Windows 98 PC out of the environment. And so this guy, and I mean, had a bit of technical savvy, thank goodness, he realized that DOSBox was able to talk on the COM port that he needed to use to connect to, and I mean, that's why they had kept the Windows 98 box, sure, because still serial could still do COM without issue. So he kind of realized that, well, DOSBox can do the COM port thing, so I'll just make sure that it, and he, like, I guess, he made sure that he still had like the right port on the back of the, still had a DB9 on the back of the newer tower. Yeah. But, then he just put DOSBox on there and ran their software, which was DOS software, inside DOSBox, and it could connect out and get to the control system, even though the surrounding OS was, well, at the time it was Windows 7, but it was newer than Windows 98. So
you'll see those in labs a lot, with the instrumentation, it has that serial DB9 connection, but it's also got an Ethernet card in that PC that's connected to the network, but then it's got that serial card to that, spectrometer over there they've been using for 20 years that's, for the instrumentation in the QA labs. Yeah, you still can find that out there. It's not uncommon. So,
sometimes you have to go to the bare hardware, right? Sometimes you can't just
the BIOS.
Talking about DB9 specifically, and the only reason this twigs in my memory is because that company that I was doing IT at with the sales guy, like, we couldn't use USB dongle DB9 ports to communicate with the older hardware. There's too much latency from the USB overhead. If we were ordering laptops, service laptops, we had to go with like Panasonic Toughbooks because they still could be kitted out with DB9 ports right there on the motherboard, right? So, it's
not all
these, and again, you never think about this in IT.
Either. Yeah.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the IT, OT. There's a huge divide in between. I am the new IT manager, and I've been told I need to take over plant OT maintenance. Ken, what's your advice to me? What should I do? I'm in this position. I got to do it. The organization already decided that person, that plant manager that knew all the OT stuff was just too expensive. So the IT guy, me, was foolish enough to say, of course, it's just computers. I'm stuck. What do I do? What do I learn? How do I move forward here?
I got 2 thoughts here.
Okay.
3 thoughts.
Update my
First
resume.
Off,
okay.
No, well, 4 thoughts. First thought is every plant's got their Bob the electrician. Find out what he likes to eat and bring him lunch. That's like your first step. Find out what he likes to eat, or find out what he likes to drink, and bring him that a few times, and just get to know this man or woman, because like, the first thing you need to do is you need to find the person who can translate the plant to you. Okay. The second thought that, and this kind of goes back to what Dino was talking about in the first part of this, is, and he alluded to it as well here just in the conversation now, right? Are there integrators, system integrators, or partners, anybody there who's like on staff, they work with the controls all the time? Get to know them and use them as a technical resource. I mean, the updating your resume part may come from the fact that when it comes time to, deliver your report, it's like, hey, why are we still running Windows 7 on 3/4 of the OT fleet? It's just like, well, can I have $20 million to completely upgrade production lines 1, 3, and 4 to the latest and greatest control systems? And also we have to rip out the paper machines on 3 and 4 in order to even move anywhere beyond Windows XP.
Sounds like I'd be having a whole bunch of really good positive stuff added to my resume as I gain those skills and knowledge.
My approach would be a little different, but not much. And I treat it just like we do the first time we walk into any plant we've never been in. When we start these projects, and it would go, I think, to the role that you're assuming, Lance. I call it the gimbal walk. The gimbal walk, and this is a Rockwell term, at least that's where I learned it anyway when I was working for Rockwell. You basically start with raw goods coming into the plant. And you go all the way through the production and processing process, all the way to finished goods and out the door, right? And to find out which assets in that plant are the most critical, that if they're not running, you're not running. So tier them. Right? What are the crown jewels in here? The ones I need to really be concerned with, or the ones that are really dangerous, and which ones, are more ancillary in the role that they play in this plant, right? And start mapping that out, right? Because the goal would really be to understand how those goods are made, where all that stuff is at, how it's all put together, and then which systems are the ones that are very critical to the process, right? And try to understand those. And then the people that are responsible for those particular areas that have the keys to those castles is the ones that you really want to spend some time interviewing, on the day-to-day production, maintenance windows that they have. There could be different seasonal runs that they do, based on, the product that they're making. They might shut down from the middle of December till after the first of the year, right? Because they're just doing fumigations and instant cleaning and replacing and all that kind of stuff. And really try to get an understanding of that, because you'll pick the technology up as you're going through that gimbal walk, right? We call them visibility studies today in our world for a cybersecurity perspective to uncover that. Because what we're usually after is to drop a tool in place. SecureOT is a little different because it can crawl through the network, right, and get to things versus an OT IDS that's got to initially sit in there passively and listen, right, and pick up traffic. Start an asset inventory. That'd be the other thing you'd want to do in your new role, is you'd want an asset inventory, right? It'd be one of the first things you would want is, what are the assets that are in here that are connected in this environment, so I can get to the risk and vulnerabilities associated with those devices, and then start digging into what are they talking to, what's legit, what's not legit, who's coming into my plant to support this stuff, how they getting in here, they show up with their laptops, they're remoting in, it definitely can be done. But that's one plant. That could take you months and months to get comfortable with even knowing the things that I was talking about, right? And multiply that by 20 plants or 30 plants, and you got 10 in the U.S., and you got 10 in China, and you got 5 in Europe, and 2 in South America. So,
yeah, timelines mean something completely different once you cross into the OT realm.
That's a very true statement. Yep. You'll hear those guys sometimes when we're starting this conversation, like, trying to get into some of this equipment that has to have a lockout, tagout, de-energized, approach to even get to it. And they're like, yeah, we don't shut down until July 4th. And it's like, when's your next maintenance window? Oh, we got a maintenance window in 3 weeks. Well, is it going to be down then? It's like, well, yeah, but they'll tell the IT guys that just to run them off, right? They throw that out there just as like, yeah, you want to come back, you come back, work the 4th of July weekend. Well, you can work then, But there's a maintenance window. There's usually a handful of them. You just gotta be in tune with that stuff, right? You gotta ask the right questions and ask the right people.
Well, and that goes back to what we were talking about a little earlier. Is that if you can't speak the language, right? If they don't trust you, if they don't regard you as someone who has any sense for what the realities of the OT environment are like. They are not going to tell you about any of those maintenance windows, or or they'll vastly understate just how much of an outage that's going to be, right?
Right, and it just, again, that's I've heard Rick say it. We've said it a lot in podcasts. I know you know this term, Ken, but you can think globally, but you got to act locally at the end of the day.
Yeah,
you really do in order to be successful.
Yeah, it's the human element.
For IT is like, trying to get some really talented, smart cat to want to work in the South 40 of Iowa at some food plant, probably not going to happen. You're just not going to get that level of an engineer, that wants to sit out there and do the things we're talking about in this particular discussion, for the next 6 months to a year of their life.
Yeah.
Well, I've had a lot of great interactions with different companies out there too, and it really resonates with me, Dino, because, you get the IT folks going in there, and it's like they can spot those guys from a mile away because they're just not asking the right questions on different things. And I watched our founder do this, and I picked up on it quite a bit. It's like he'll walk in and he'll start talking shop to these guys out there, Bob the electrician and everything like that. And it's like, oh yeah, we got that, or it's like, no, we ran into that too, or yeah, I've noticed that on this particular controller and everything like that. And we'll get to talking to them. It's like, well, you need to get into everything. Well, here's a drawer with all the passwords in it. It's like night and day. It's like they're welcoming arms, to the folks that are in the know on all the process. And once you talk to them a little bit, it's like, hey, we're not here to get you in trouble. We're going to find the bodies, because of what our solution does. And we're just trying to build you like an automated asset inventory. And like, as soon as you tell them that, they're just eyeballs light up. And
you guys love it. You start showing this stuff to them. And that's the tactic. I don't sell to IT. I sell through them. Because my goal is to get to the OT guys. I want them to be excited about this. Is one of the puzzling things. We've witnessed a lot of clients that went out and bought a Clarity, for example, and had it for several years. And we're working on their plants. None of the people that we work with in the plant know anything about it. They don't see any reporting coming out of it. They don't have any access to the user interface, specific to their plant or their process area. They're not even involved in the conversation at all. And the goal is really to show them what these tools provide for them, the data that they get from, the discovery from these platforms and programs that we have. And the goal is to get them excited. It's not to get IT excited, because usually what happens is if you do it right, the IT guys are like, oh, good, they got friends, people who speak their language, people that aren't going to throw them out of the plant, Because I always say, if your OT people didn't like us, we would have been gone a long time ago. We wouldn't be allowed to come in here and work on your packaging line or on your extruder or on your filler. You wouldn't allow us in if we were bad at it, right? And going up, with the right PPE goes a long way. As trivial as that sounds, you'd be surprised. You want to have a plant manager look at you sideways, show up. He's thinking you're going to work on his plant. You don't have any safety glasses. You don't have a hard hat. You don't have on safety shoes. You don't have a high vis vest on. Now because he's got to outfit you now. His people have to go find stuff to get you to even get out there. If they, and then we lose 30 minutes while they're doing all that stuff. Because we're not taking the tourist trip through the plant. We're not walking up on the mezzanines and looking down on the plant floor. No, we're actually going to be on the plant floor. I've had IT guys say, well, we don't want to walk the whole plant floor. We just want to stay up where the tourists go. And it's like, well, if you're going to stay up there, you have to help me. So I need to get Bob the electrician. And if I'm in England, you call him a Sparky, because I learned that 25 years ago.
Yes.
Sparky's over there.
Oh, yeah.
Tyler, if I said I was out working at a plant in Wyoming, you probably know who I'm talking about. I knew I'd arrived. Well, two things told me that I arrived. Because one time I was there, and this was for an early NERC SIP assessment back when that first was a thing, and you had to take a lot of photos. And I had worked at a camera store previously, so I had a fairly decent camera, which I brought with me on trips. So I was the guy who got tasked with taking all the photos of devices. So on the first, after about the first week, the lead plant guy there runs away, comes back with a label maker, and he just prints out two labels. One says Kenneth, one says Snapshot, and it's been on my hard hat ever since.
That's awesome.
But what really told me that I arrived, and this sticker I've kind of buried a little bit, it's this one here in the middle. One of the times that we were there, a lot of the plant operational staff were not quite on strike, but they were doing like some early picketing. And we showed up to work one day, and same guy, he's standing there at the gate. And, he sees our vehicle come up and he waves us over. So we kind of pulled to the side and he's just like, and these are this isn't even an official sticker. He had gotten these printed at Staples, right? And he just starts handing them to us. He's like, put these on your hats. If the guys see them, they will not give you a hard time. Anybody who's not wearing one of these stickers, we're assuming they're here to take a union job. But, I know what you guys are doing. It's important. Put this on. And, exactly that kind of thing, right? It's like you're cultivating a relationship, and you're wanting this person to bring you into their life, essentially, right? The plant, in as much as their facility is part of their life, they're bringing you into that, and not just in a superficial way, but now in an actual deep and almost intimate way, because, that those are huge gestures of trust.
Yep.
And if you can't achieve those, then you're not going to be able to achieve much.
All right, well, that's it for this month. You have been listening to OT After Hours, a podcast about industrial cybersecurity, why it matters, and all the challenges that it presents. Please share episodes with your family, friends, and colleagues, and anyone else you think would be interested in industrial cybersecurity. And please consider leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast has been produced by me, Kenneth Kully. Our opening and closing music is by the ever so talented Octo Sound. Look them up if you need some music for a podcast or video. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Lance. And thank you, Dino. This was a fantastic two-parter.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you out there for listening. We will talk to you soon.